This is seriously so out of control. Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and welcome to my scrap pile. Now, to be fair, not all of this is scrap, just like 70% of it. Please tell me I'm not the only one out here hoarding wood scraps. So for the last 5 years, my friend Katie and I have been hosting what we like to call Scrap Wood Summer. Basically, every week during the month of August, we share a new project made entirely from wood scraps. So I started out by sharing these only on my website, but I recently started filming them too so that I could share them here as well. So welcome to Scrap Wood Summer YouTube edition. So the goal with Scrap Wood Summer has always been to keep our scrap wood pile under control. You can obviously see how well that's going, but even if this barely makes a dent, it's still one of my favorite times of the year because I really enjoy coming up with these new project ideas. So if you need to find some good uses for your own wood scraps, let's dive in, and hopefully this video will give you a few ideas. This scrap wood project just requires a little bit of 1x3 board. I'm building a towel rack for my guest bathroom, and the vanity in there is red oak. So I found some red oak scraps to use for this, so it'll match. But any wood type would work great here. First, I cut a piece of 1x3 to the length that I wanted my rack, about 24 inches. This design would also work great for coats, hats, purses, whatever, so feel free to make it as long or as short as you need. From the remaining 1x3, I started drawing out kind of a boomerang shape to use for the hooks. I made these about 7.5 inches long and kind of freehanded a design that I thought would work well. Then I cut this out with a jigsaw. I wasn't 100% sure if this would look right, so I tested it on the backer piece just to make sure that I was happy with the shape before tracing 3 more onto my 1x3 board. Then I cut these out as well to give me 4 hooks. After sanding, I laid these out on the back piece to see how I wanted to space them. Once I was happy with it, I marked the center of each hook and I used a square to draw lines at each mark. That way I could pre-drill 2 pilot holes at each mark for my screws. One at a time, I clamped the hooks onto the backer, centered on the pilot holes, then I drove screws to secure them from the backside. Because this red oak can tend to split easily, I did pre-drill pilot holes into each hook as well before driving the screws, so having these back holes already there made this so much easier. After all the hooks were attached, I stained the rack to match my vanity, then I could hang it up using a couple screws into the wall studs. This was such a simple project, but I really love how it has both a modern and a vintage vibe. I may just have to make another one now for coats in my entryway. For this build, I needed some scrap 1x6, some scrap 1x2, and some small trim to go onto the front. These super easy scrap wood shoe racks were a small part of the recent renovation that I gave my mom's closet, but they were a huge help in getting the shoes off the floor and onto the unused wall space. To make them, I cut a small piece of 1x6 and I marked 1.5 inches in from 2 opposite corners. Then I drew a line between these marks and cut this in 2 using a jigsaw. These will be the 2 sides of my shoe rack. This is totally optional, but I rounded over the sharp edges with the jigsaw as well, just so they weren't so pointy. Next, I cut 2 pieces of 1x2 about 24 inches long and I sanded all of my pieces. I actually used 1x2s from a previous project that I had taken apart, so I had to make sure to sand off all of the existing stain. Then I nailed the 1x2s between the sides. I do recommend using some wood glue in addition to the nails, though I took my chances and I skipped it. Finally, I cut to fit the small trim piece to go across the front of my shoe rack. This was just a leftover strip of wood that I had in the scrap pile. It was roughly 3/4 inch by 1 inch, so a 3/4 inch square dowel or even another 1x2 piece would work fine for this. It's literally just here to help hold the shoes in the rack. Okay, so not all shoes are the same size or the same style. They might not all fit in the same size rack. So I ended up making Mom 3 different sizes of these. They're all assembled exactly the same. The only difference is the side pieces here. I originally made this one. This fit a bunch of my shoes perfectly, but I wear a lot of very flat and flimsy sneakers. Mom, not so much. So I thought this would work great because it fit my shoes, but it didn't quite fit Mom's shoes. It will fit some of her like really flat, like slip-on dress shoes, but the majority of her shoes are quite a bit thicker, like boot style or wedges. So for that, I ended up making these a little shorter and deeper so that the wedges and the like wider, thicker shoes will fit into here. So basically I made 3 sizes. I made the original taller, skinnier one. I made 2 of these that's kind of like a medium size. This is a 1x6, so it's 5.5 inches tall. This was also a 1x6, but instead of cutting it running this way, I cut it with the grain running this way, so it made it narrower and longer. And then I made this style, which is similar to this one, just a little bit deeper. So I encourage you to grab some of your shoes that you plan to put in here and build this to fit that size and style of shoe. After staining, I screwed these into the wall studs in my mom's closet. The taller, shallower shoe rack is great for flats and small sneakers, and the shorter, deeper version is great for tennis shoes or wedges. These would make an excellent addition in a closet, an entryway, or a mudroom. This simple project is a great way to add some storage to the kitchen without any demo or any holes in the wall. For this, I grabbed some scrap 1x6s and a scrap wood dowel. I carefully measured the height and width of my range above the countertop. This shelf will fit around it, so I need to allow for just a little bit of wiggle room. Then I cut 2 pieces of 1x6 about 3 inches longer than the height of my range controls for the sides, and then I cut another piece to the width of my stove for the top. This will make more sense as it comes together. To help keep these items from falling off the edge of the shelf, I added a dowel as a rail. So I drilled a hole toward the top front corner of each of my side pieces, about a 1/2 inch deep, and then I trimmed my dowel to fit. I plan to assemble this using pocket holes and screws, so I also drilled pocket holes into the ends of my top 1x6. If you don't want to use pocket holes, you could also just assemble this using brad nails or screws, but these will be visible in the end result. I wanted my shelf to be stained brown and the rail to be stained black. This would be pretty difficult to do once it's all together, so I stained my pieces separately first. Then I assembled it using pocket hole screws, making sure to place the rail into the drilled out holes on each side. Now this simple little shelf slides right over the range controls to add some handy storage for spices, oils, and other go-to accessories that you're always reaching for when cooking. I thought the towel rack was my favorite project of this year's Scrapwood Summer, but I changed my mind after building this. This one is my favorite. I gathered a scrap 1x12, some scrap 1x6, and some scrap 1x3 to make this with. Then I headed inside to measure my sofa arm. Basically, I just need to know the width, and in my case, it's about 5 inches. Now the sides are 1x6s, which are 3/4 inches thick, so my top needs to be cut to 5 inches plus 2 times 3/4, which is 6.5 inches wide. So I ripped this on a table saw. Now stick with me, this is going to make more sense once it comes together. I opted to make this tray 12 inches long, so I cut this top piece to 12 inches, then I cut 2 1x6s and 2 1x3 boards the same length. Now all of my pieces are cut, so I just have to sand them real quick before putting it all together. For assembly, because let's be honest, this doesn't need to be heavy duty, I just used some wood glue and brad nails. So I glued and nailed the little book ledge onto one of the 1x6s first. Then I added the top and the other 1x6 side. To be honest, these scrap boards were scrap for a reason. They weren't the best pieces, so the edges weren't really nice and sharp or square. So nailing alone didn't really pull the joints as tight as I'd like, so I clamped it while the glue dried. But once the glue was dry, it was good and solid. I added a little drop of wood glue into each of the nail holes, then I sanded while it was still wet, that way the dust would mix in and it would fill all the holes. Then I finished up this project with some Minwax water-based stain in aged oak. This color was the perfect warm tone contrast to my grayish white couch, and while this is a really small and simple project, I'm so glad that I finally have a good place to safely rest my tea and coffee while I'm chilling on the couch. This last project is an oldie but goodie. I actually made these back in 2024, but I never shared them on YouTube. You'll have to forgive the footage. Since I never planned to make this into a long form video, I filmed it all vertically, but you'll get the idea. So for this project, I'm making some decorative lanterns from cedar fence picket scraps. So I cut 4 pieces to the same length, and I traced a line up and down both sides about an inch from the edge. Then I used a stain can to help me connect these toward the top into an arch. After cutting these out with a jigsaw, I sanded them. Now, cedar fence pickets are really great because they're cheap, but they're also really rough. A good sanding makes a world of difference. So one of my favorite things about this project is that you can customize the size as short or as tall as you want by simply cutting the pieces longer or shorter. So I ended up making 3 different sizes of these, and I just glued and nailed them together at each corner. Then I could cut another piece of fence picket to add to the bottom. Because I had several stain colors on hand, I stained each of these a different color since they were already different sizes. And finally, I drilled some holes to add rope handles. Now obviously this part is completely optional, but they're decorative, so why not add a little flair? I've had these on my porch now for a couple of years with these solar candles, and I just love them so much. But of course, if you didn't want to use them outside, you can use them inside as well for a fun centerpiece or decor in just about any room. And that wraps up this year's Scrapwood Summer Series. This is one of my favorite things that we do every year, but it's becoming a little bit more of a challenge to think of new project ideas that I haven't already shared before. So I hope you guys enjoyed seeing these, and as always, if you're looking for more project ideas, scrapwood or not, I've got plenty more over on my website, and I will leave a link in the video description below. Stay tuned for plenty more projects coming soon, but until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and happy building.